Good afternoon and welcome back to CB's Book Club. I'm your host, Danielle Neal. Socially, things have tightened even more since our last airing. We have gone from a somewhat loose state of emergency to a drastically tight quarantine. That means that even more CB Book Club prospects are held up at home with not much to do. So why not read? Reading can relax your mind, teach you new things, distract you from the COVID-19 stresses, and it expands your imagination. Reading is almost effortless, unless your prescription glasses goes missing. In today's edition of CB's Book Club, we welcome another Belizean writer, Miss Sayu Bhojwani. Miss Bhojwani, welcome to our show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Miss Bhojwani, can you tell us a little about yourself, starting with your life in Belize and when you migrated to the U.S.?
Sure. I moved to the United States as a college student, like many Belizeans, but all my formative years were in Belize City mostly. My parents moved to Belize when I was 4. And so I went to St. Catherine's Elementary and St. Catherine's Academy, and then moved to start college, as I said.
And do you still have family in Belize? Do you come to visit us?
I do. I try to take every opportunity I can. I'm in Belize at least once a year, and if I get really lucky, twice a year. My parents still live there. My brother and his wife live there. And then I have extended family as well. But I also have a large number of friendships, as a result of going to school. And after college, I came back and worked and taught English at UCB. So I have a network of people in Belize that I don't get to see often enough.
Great. So Ms. Bhojwani, I did a little research on you and saw that you had started the South Asian Youth Action, SAYA, a nonprofit in Queens, and in the 90s that is, and then you had the New American Leaders nonprofit that you currently held. Can you tell us a bit about those?
Sure. So I started South Asian Youth Action when I was younger, and I had moved to the U.S. only for maybe about 10 years at that point. And it was really, it's a youth development organization, and it's focused on young people who are of, we say South Asian, that's Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, as well as Indian people or people of Indian descent from Guyana and Trinidad. And it runs a range of programs. It's still in operation. But the work that I do now, I was really, even in Belize, although I consider myself a Belizean, I was an immigrant to Belize. And so my experience in Belize is different from people who, whose families have been there for generations. And so I identify very strongly with the immigrant experience. And a lot of the work that I've done in New York has been tied to that. The organization I now run is called New American Leaders, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's New American Leaders for a new America, an America that whose leaders will look more like the rest of the country. If you look at Congress, for example, it's what I call pale, male, stale Congress. Doesn't really have the energy and the vitality of the big, the diversity that we have in New York, never mind in the rest of the country. And so basically what we do is we teach people the ins and outs of running for office, and then we support them once they're in office so that they can be strong advocates for the communities that they come from.
That's really, really nice. And I have a love for politics as well, so your book is very interesting. But before we start, can we backtrack a bit? How did you start writing, and did you always have a love for writing?
I always had a love for reading. I can't remember the exact point at which I started to love writing, but I've always had my nose in a book from when I was a child. And as you know, in Belize City, we don't have a lot of libraries and places where it's easily able to get books. So when I was a child, we used to run this little scam. My sister and I had a little scam where we were incredibly fast readers. So we would go to bookstores on Friday night or Saturday morning, and we would buy a book, and then we would take it home and we would read it so fast that nobody believed that we could read that fast. And so we would take it back before the day was over and exchange it for another book. And so we kind of used the bookstore. We didn't have a ton of money to buy new books all the time. And we used our allowance to get the 1 or 2 books that we could get, and then basically use the bookstore as a library. And then, of course, as I got older, I learned more. And as we started to travel, I was able to figure out how to access used books and the like. So my love for reading, I think, preceded a desire to write and to articulate, the stories and the perspectives that I think, I feel like I have unique stories and perspectives, being an immigrant to Belize and then being an immigrant to the United States. And writing allows me to show those perspectives, but it also allows people who read the work to see themselves in those stories, which is what reading did for me. You know, I saw myself in young adventurers or in young immigrants or in young women. And I think that's the beauty of being able to tell stories from the perspectives that I have.
Great. Thanks for sharing some light on growing up in Belize. I bet that was a lot of fun. So now let's get into your book. Can you share with our viewers what People Like Us is? Can you tell us all that it is about?
So the book, unfortunately, I guess it's very U.S. specific, but it tells the stories of people like us who ran for office. So in my book, I talk, for example, about a woman who came from Mexico when she was 6, and she was undocumented. And then in 1984, after President Reagan passed a bill to create a pathway to citizenship, which I think some Belizeans also benefited from, she became a permanent resident and a citizen, and then she ran for office in 2016, and now she's in the Arizona State Legislature. There are a couple of people in the book who were formerly undocumented and who are now serving in office. I tell the story of a woman by the name of Ilhan Omar, who defeated a legislator who had been elected even before Ilhan was born. So this woman had been in office for 44 years, and Ilhan came on and basically ran a very exciting election and defeated her. And Ilhan's a really famous congresswoman now, but she was a state legislator before. And so I don't know sadly, I don't actually even know the terms that are the equivalent in Belize, but I wanted to show people that it's possible, even if you're new to the United States, even if you don't have a lot of money, as long as you're willing to work and listen to your community, it's possible to run for office and represent your community and do the right thing for the people that you care about.
That's great. And I believe that whereas your book is based on politics in America, for some reason it tends to stem to many countries. In many countries we see still old men being in political seats, and that is something we definitely need to change. What was your inspiration for People Like Us?
So I want to say something about what you said earlier too. Like, I think the other thing we see in countries is that people who are in positions of power use that power in a way that is really destructive, right? And part of what I wanted to show in this book is that it's possible to use power in a way that's beneficial to our communities. And I do think that's something that applies to anywhere in the world. The inspiration was because when I started the organization, I thought the work that we had before us was to help people understand what it took to run for office. But as I met more and more people, I just learned these incredible stories, these really difficult things that people had to go through in their life, and then they still wanted to run for office and represent this country in which I now live, which has not been kind to newcomers. And so I wrote the stories because I was inspired by them, and I wanted more people to learn about them. And not everyone is a writer. Not everyone is able to articulate their story in the way that I could. And also, not everyone understands how powerful their story is. And so I was inspired by the stories to share them with other people because I just thought they were so powerful and amazing, and that they would inspire other people to run and serve or work for their communities in any way they thought possible.
Great. So, Ms. Bhojwani, we read that you were the first commissioner of immigrant affairs for New York. Did that position have any influence on the writing of this book?
Well, that position, I think it had an influence on me understanding why it mattered when someone like me was in office, right? So it was right after September 11th that I became commissioner. And so people in immigrant communities were really scared. Sometimes they were scared even if they were citizens, even if they already had what we call green cards. And what I was able to do in that position is to explain things about being an immigrant in a way that really, if you didn't have that experience, you wouldn't understand it. You don't understand what it's like to be afraid that the police might pick you up for no reason at all. You don't understand what it means to navigate a whole new work environment, a new school system, all of those things. And so because I had been in a position in government, I knew that it mattered to have voices like mine. And so it inspired me to start New American Leaders, which then inspired me to write the book. So it was kind of an indirect relationship.
Great. You're doing really good work. But what message did you desire to leave with your readers after they have read People Like Us?
I think for me, there is the core message is about how each of us can have an impact in whatever way we choose, that there's no person who's too poor, too uneducated, who should be ashamed about standing up and working on behalf of their community. And that doesn't mean running for office. That can be doing something on your street or in your community in your housing community and that kind of thing. And so for me, being a Belizean is a core part of who I am. And in the way that when I just was talking to someone about this earlier today, that to be Belizean to me means to be able to appreciate that you can live peacefully and harmoniously in a multiracial society. And I think that the United States has a lot to learn about how to be a successful multiracial society. And so the book is really a message to all multiracial societies about how to be inclusive. And it's a message to all of us that we can all play a role in shaping the place that we live in.
Okay, and are you working on any new books as we speak?
No, it's funny you were saying that it's easy, that one of the easiest things you can do to read. I have to confess that since the virus has started to unfold in New York and around the country, it's been hard to concentrate on anything that's longer than a tweet. So I have not been writing any books, but I have written short pieces on Medium, which is accessible to everyone. It's a place where everyone can be a writer. So if there's any aspiring writers in Belize, you can just post on Medium. There's no editors. You can just post whatever thoughts you want, and they're accessible to everyone. So I've been doing shorter pieces, mostly about what it means to be a leader during this time.
Okay, and how can people access your book as well as your short pieces?
The short pieces are on Medium, and I also have a website that's my name, sayubhojwani.com, and that has everything that I've written. The book is available on Amazon, and I just think you can follow me on Twitter or on Facebook if you are on social.
And so finally, Ms. Bhojwani, in a turn now of your book, we know that COVID-19 cases are growing. How are you and your family keeping safe and occupied during this pandemic? I know that you're in New York, and There is a lot happening. How are you guys?
Well, we're great. Thank you for asking. I feel incredibly fortunate to be safe and healthy. We are following all the rules, washing our hands, not touching our face. That's the hardest one. I tell my family that I was well trained to be clean and meticulous from having been raised in Belize. In fact, recently my kid said we walked into the building of our lobby and they had used a cleaning product and they said, "Oh, this smells like Belize," because we smell cleaning product, that particular cleaning product in Belize. I don't remember what it's called. And I was like, yeah, well, we're very well trained to clean from top to bottom. So we're doing that. And then I think we're doing the thing that people underestimate, right? The responsible thing, which is to stay indoors and to go out less, so that we're not, because if we have symptoms and we don't know that we have them, we definitely don't want to be responsible for passing it on to other people. So, we're following all the rules and playing a lot of board games and watching TV and getting a lot of great family time. And I feel really lucky, and I hope that many other people are in that situation.
Okay. And so any encouragement for our book club followers? And do you have any Belizean writer, Belizean book that you would like to recommend for us?
Well, I'll say, I was deeply influenced from an early age by Zia Joe's Bekalam, which I suspect everyone in Belize has already read. And I have read some of the works by Ian Vasquez, with whom I went to school at SCE. But the encouragement that I would give people is to start, not everybody, this is not the time to pick up the 400-page novel, because I think if you're like me and many of us, it's hard to concentrate. But I would start small, read longer stories. A lot of the US newspapers and The Guardian have made a lot of their material free. The New Yorker, I read a lot of great stuff in The New Yorker. It's a little bit longer form. I also think things like Nancy Drew and Harry Potter, which you can read to or with your kids, is a good way to spend time with kids as well as to read. But I don't think you should feel pressure to read War and Peace or something, like that big classic novel that's been sitting on your desk for a long time. It's probably not going to happen during this time. But if you start small and start with the things that interest you, then maybe you can build up.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Bhojwani. And from all the way over here, do know that we celebrate your work, and we find the message in your book a very important one, especially for the environment that you live in and that we live in. People like us in CB's Book Club will be looking forward to new work from you whenever that comes. And so on that note, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and you all stay safe and healthy.
Thank you so much. And on that note, viewers, people like us in the CB Book Club are also looking for more Belizean writers to feature. If you want to be interviewed, send us an email at info@colorblind.bz. You can also email us if you have suggestions for Belizean books that we should promote in our CB Book Club. Also, continue following us on Facebook for even more CB Book Club updates. Until I see you again, take care, continue to read, and stay inside.